Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of PodSaveChocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about what goes into putting together a successful chocolate festival. And I've been thinking about this for the last little while because I maintain a list of chocolate festivals and holidays on the Chocolate Life, and I've been updating it. And it occurred to me that there's a lot of different kinds of festivals in the world. I've been to lots of different festivals, and what goes into making a really, really good one. I want to start off today by mentioning that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there, you can find links, you can search everything that I've done here. Almost 1,600 different posts are there and directly searchable. And if you're not a member, you can click on the green link, which is on the upper right-hand corner, or where this little avatar is down there, and you can become a member. And appreciate your support. While you're here, like, subscribe, share this video on YouTube and wherever it is that you might be connecting. And if you, no matter where you're connecting from, you can go into the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on LinkedIn or Facebook. And you can let me know where in the world you're connecting from. That'd be great. I'll get a shout out up on screen. And you can also ask questions or make comments about what it is, anything you hear in the day's episode. For every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. And here's the post for today's episode. It acts as a rough script. So this is not fully scripted, but this is sort of the run of show, what it is that I'm going to talk about. And it also contains links so that you don't have to follow along during the episode. You can go to this post on the Chocolate Life after the fact or while you're watching, and you can go and look at the resources that I mentioned. And if there are any resources that get mentioned in the comments, which are not included when I publish this, then I will go and add them to this after the fact. So I want to start with a little bit of history. We'll step back in a little bit of history. My first trade show as an adult was in 1983, when I got involved in the computer graphics industry. And I would represent my company's products at trade shows. And from 1983 to 1998, I went to over 100 trade shows and conferences and festivals in high technology, computer graphics, interactive multimedia, the internet, Macworld, TED 2, I've been to many of them. And when I got into the world of chocolate in 1994, I didn't attend my first chocolate festival in 1998. And that first chocolate festival was the New York Chocolate Show, the Salon du Chocolat in New York in 1998. Now, I didn't remember if it was 1996 or 1998. So I went, in this case, to DuckDuckGo, and I asked them, when was it? And they said that the first show was in 1998. I'm really, really happy because the two resources they mentioned for determining this result were the Chocolate Life and the Chocolate Life archive site. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm really, really happy about that. But the New York Chocolate Show was about 4.5 years into my chocolate adventure, right? And I don't remember much about it, the festival, except that it was in the Puck Building, which is in SoHo at the corner of Lafayette and East Houston. It was rainy, and I remember standing outside in the cold on at least one of the days to go in. I remember meeting the organizers, Sylvie Douce, François Janté. I probably met Jacques Therese for the first time on that day. I'm sure there were dozens of others, chocolate makers and confectioners. No craft chocolate makers as we know it today, because the craft chocolate movement hadn't really started yet, although Scharfenberger was founded in 96 or 97. I don't remember if they were at this original 1998 event. But this is a first chance for me to see a lot of international chocolate makers, confectioners in one place. And it was really, really important for me at the time. This is late October, early November, as near as I recall. And other things that were really important to me in 1998 were the previous June, I made my first trip to visit a chocolate maker, Stéphane Bonnat, in Voiron in France. This was during the World Cup in 1998, which was interesting being in France during that time, and not being a huge fan of FIFA football at the time, but being able to spend 3 or 4 days with the Bonnat family in Voiron and being welcomed into the family were just really huge. So these are like two really important events for me in 1998. And this is almost how I construct sort of my mind palace, which is, I think about events which are connected to each other in time and space. And that helps me remember all these things that I have done over the past 20 some odd years. So this is part of what I do. If you don't know much about Bonnat, there's a link to the Bonnat website. I'm here, and I was there for the first time, as I said, 22 years, just as COVID lockdowns were happening, and a little story about my return to Bonnat in 2020. So in the 26 years since my first chocolate festival, right, I've been to hundreds of chocolate festivals, conferences, events around the world, throughout South America, Central America, North America, and in Europe. I've just been to many of them, in the Caribbean as well. And I want to share from that experience. And so I put together a short list. By the way, this is a toggle, and so you can just click on this thing at the top, and it will open and shut. I do it to collapse the length of the page, so you can focus on what we're talking about, one item at a time. So I've been to a lot of shows and festivals, and for this episode, I compiled this list of festivals that I've been to. The first two are non-chocolate festivals. So they're SIGGRAPH, the Special Interest Group for Graphics of the ACM, the Association of Computing Machinery. So I went to every single SIGGRAPH between 1984 and 1998. Even after I left full-time my technology career, I was involved in going to SIGGRAPH. They represent a community of people that gathered every summer, and I just loved going there and catching up with people that I met. I'm also going to talk about an aspect of the Basel Watch Fair, which I went to in 1996, which there's a very, very specific remembrance that I want to bring in there. And then my work at the World Pastry Forum, the World and National Pastry Team Championships, the Salon du Chocolat, primarily in Paris, but also some remembrances in New York and London prior to 2018, the Chicago Fine Chocolate Festival, my going to FCIA gatherings, Chocoa and the Origin Chocolate Festival in Amsterdam. There are a bunch of places, and I just wanted to share just a small collection of the things that I have done, the places that I have been, to give you an idea that I'm speaking from a well of experience, that this is not something that this is not something that, well, let me state it positively, that this is something that comes from this deep well of experience, and not just in the world of cocoa and chocolate, but also in the world of high technology. The two are complementary, in my opinion. So the first thing that I want to say about what are some of the elements of a successful chocolate festival, and again, they may not be what you think, have to do with the location and the venue. And I want to talk about this, about festivals which may start out maybe being successful to some extent, and then for some reason they lose some cachet and they end up fading into some obscurity, might be the best way to think about it. And one of those is a chocolate festival that I worked on, the Big Chocolate Show in New York City. The Big Chocolate Show lasted 4 editions, so 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. It was organized by an events management company, the Big Events Group, and I was on the team. I was part of the core team that helped organize this festival. And the first 2 years, it took place in a really well-known location to people who were involved in the New York club scene in the 1980s, which is the Chelsea Terminal Markets, otherwise known as the Tunnel nightclub. And it was chosen because it was home to other festivals, other events like this, hot sauce and things like that, barbecue. But it also was in a reasonable location. It was on 11th Avenue. There was a new subway line that went there. So in the Hudson Yards, it was relatively easy to get to. It had the space that we were looking for. It wasn't perfect in terms of ingress and egress and things like that, but it was a beautiful space, and it wasn't a hotel ballroom, and it wasn't a really conventional um, 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 conference center, right? Or a conference center. So that was the first 2 years. It was at the Tunnel. Now, for one reason or another, the person who ran the company decided that they wanted to move it from the Tunnel to a hotel location. And it wasn't just that it was a hotel location, is that this location was closer to Midtown and was more accessible. It was right across the street from Penn Station. But it turns out that it was a hotel. And so it was perceived to be a slight step down in terms of cachet. Even though it was easier to get to, you had to go through the lobby of the hotel to get to the space. And the spaces were smaller. And so the egress and ingress and how things were crowded made a huge difference into how not only the participants felt about it, but the way that the exhibitors felt about the space. They had gone from this really lovely brick soaring ceilings to this basically hotel ballroom. And that was not perceived to be as upscale for one reason or another. And then we went from there. That was my last year when we did it at the hotel. And then the next year, it moved to a casino resort racetrack in Queens. And so it's no longer in Manhattan. People have to get on 2 trains, I believe, or one very long subway. It's 45 minutes or more out of Manhattan on the subway. And so that was the final year of the event. So the location and the venue made an enormous amount of difference to the long-term success of the Big Chocolate Show. It is one of the elements that led to its demise over time. The Northwest Chocolate Festival is an interesting one. It started out as a downtown hotel show, but then it moved to Bell Harbor, and then it went to Smith Cove Arena and Marina. I think it went back to the Bell Harbor for 1 year, and now it's in Bellevue, Washington. The challenge there is that the move from the hotel venue to the Bell Harbor I saw as a great step up. It was a much more beautiful space. It was a much more open space, still not difficult to get to. It was right on the water. It's just a really lovely venue and really nice to go to. The move to Smith Cove was a much larger space, but it was harder to get to. That didn't seem to affect its popularity at all, right? And there were really nice things about the way the Smith Cove space worked. However, there was no soundproofing downstairs. So when they did pole and drape to segregate all of the speaker sessions, it meant that you could hear the speaker next door. If somebody was performing music, you could hear the music from 3 lectures away. So it was challenging in that respect. So every venue you go to has pluses and you have minuses. With the Smith Cove, most of the chocolate makers were upstairs. The equipment companies, for the most part, were downstairs. The sessions, most of them were downstairs. But there was no public transportation to the space. You either had to drive, you had to take a taxi, you had to take a ride service car to get there. And so it was not as easy to get to. And Bellevue is not central Seattle, but my understanding is that central Seattle is not the place it once was. And so I haven't been to Seattle since 2018. The Northwest Chocolate Festival has got this changing venue challenge. And I'm hoping to get back there maybe this year to see what the new venue is looking like to be able to do it. But it's really, really important that the venue be appropriate to who you're trying to reach, right? At Chocoa, they've also had some movement. They went from the first 2 years at the Maritime Museum, which was not difficult to get to, but it wasn't in central Amsterdam. Since the third edition of Chocoa, it's been at the Beurs van Berlage, which is just between the Dam Square and Amsterdam Central. It is the perfect location, just geographically. All of Amsterdam is focused on this part of Amsterdam, but it's also the Beurs was the home of a stock market, a commodities exchange more than as much as stock market, and cacao had been sold in this building through the 1970s. And so there was a way to make this historic connection. It's a beautiful building. And as a matter of fact, this is the photo is taken at the Grand Hall in the Beurs van Berlage. This is the 2015 edition of Chocoa. I was there. I took this photo. And just a beautiful building, one of the more beautiful buildings to hold a chocolate show in. The logistics, again, it's easy to get to. It's right at hubs of major transportation. It's near everything that most people want to do when they're in Amsterdam. It's 2 blocks from the red light district. If that's what you're interested in, the Old Red Church, the Oude Kerk, it's just a great location. The only other location I've ever been into a chocolate festival that's more beautiful than the Beurs van Berlage is the Royal Tropical Institute kit, which is where the Origin Chocolate event took place. It is a stunningly beautiful location, but it's very tiny. For an event like the Origin Chocolate event, which is really aimed at sort of the upper tier of just craft chocolate and not chocolate in general, if you have a chance and you're in Amsterdam, not if you have a chance, make a point to go to the Royal Tropical Institute and go into the main hall. It is one of the most beautiful spaces to hold the chocolate festival. I think you'll agree that I've ever been into. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I have been to more chocolate festivals in Amsterdam than any other city in the world. For a while there, I would go to London for the New York Chocolate Show. Then I would go to Amsterdam for the Origin Chocolate event, and then I would go to Paris for the Salon du Chocolat. So there was this sort of fall festival circuit that I would go through. So it's really important to understand that the venue, where it is located, in the actual the venue itself has an important contribution to make to what it is that you want to achieve, and it needs to reflect the ethos. What are the principles? Why are we doing this festival? What are we trying to achieve? They should be in concert, and the location will tell you a lot about what you can expect from the festival. It works both ways, just to know. So last year, 2024, the Craft Chocolate Experience in San Francisco was at the Palace of Fine Arts. The Palace of Fine Arts, an absolutely beautiful location in San Francisco. It's not really close to public transportation. And so while it represented just an iconic structure, an iconic place to be, it was almost assuredly very, very expensive, not easy to get to, and there wasn't a whole lot to do when you got there. So having been to the Palace of Fine Arts on several occasions, there's no easy place to just go out onto the street and get lunch. I mean, if you just want to go out and take a break and walk outside, absolutely beautiful place, right? And so it made some sense given what the organizers of the Craft Chocolate Experience wanted to do, but the actual logistics of the space made it less than ideal for exhibitors and for anybody who didn't own a car, right, or didn't rent a car to be there. So it's important to understand, those relationships. And it's over the hill from downtown, from central San Francisco. Just a real quick shout out. We want to say hello to Elmer Pineda. Elmer, hello from Honduras, SoHo Chocolate Company. Elmer, I believe that I'm going to be seeing you in a couple of weeks in New York City. Is that true at the Salon de Chocolat in New York? I'm now going, so I may see you in a couple of weeks. I've known Elmer for quite some time. I saw him for the first time at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival. We met up in person for the first time. So it'll be great to see you again. And if you're watching, go into the comments. Let me know where in the world you're connecting from. If you have a comment or a question. That question about location and venue then leads into, right, knowing yourself and knowing your markets and knowing your audience. So everything that the organizers, when I do everything that the organizer does, right, when it comes to put together a chocolate festival, must be contextually relevant, and it has to be tailored to the market. So what will work in New York City may not work in Seattle. What works in Seattle may not work in Dallas. What works in Dallas may not work in San Francisco. We are all those cities are in the United States. However, they are very, very different from each other. Could you take exactly the way the Northwest Chocolate Festival is organized and who its market is and plunk it down in Atlanta? I don't know the answer to that question, if you'd be successful. Or if you'd to take the Northwest Chocolate Festival and move it to Los Angeles. I don't know. It would be successful. You need to have something which understands who the local market is. And I would suggest that the average Seattleite or the average person who is living in the Pacific Northwest, in the Northwest Washington part of the state, has a different relationship to food and nature than somebody who's living in downtown Los Angeles. And you need to take those differences into account. How you get around the city of Los Angeles is different from how you get around the city of Seattle, and you need to take those differences into account. And so Paris, the birthplace of the Salon du Chocolat, is not Tokyo. And so the way the festival is organized in Paris is different from the way the festival is organized in Tokyo. They're very, very different events. One caters to what we know about Parisians and French chocolate, and the other one caters to Japanese sensibility, and it's also targeted around a specific holiday, Valentine's Day, and the way the Japanese celebrate Valentine's Day. It's been very successful because number one, there is a local partner who does this, who does the organization for it, essentially licensing the brand. But it is really, really targeted with an understanding. I don't know if you could take the Salon du Chocolat in Paris and move it to Tokyo and have it be successful, right? And just understand that you need to understand that what works in one location may not work in another location. That you might have a formula, you might have an idea about how you want to organize it, but you need to target it specifically to the requirements of the local market. Another thing is you need to recognize, or you need to understand, who your audience is and how large the audience is. So for example, I might take a look at the Fine Chocolate Industry Association in their annual meetings. And the entire membership of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, is that large enough to support, right, the kind of event that they want to put on? Maybe not. But you need to ask that question for yourself. Is the local market large enough? Is the audience that you want to serve large enough to support a successful venue? And the answer may be no, right? In which case you either say, okay, I'm not going to do this, or you say, I need to change what it is that I'm doing to attract a different audience. And so if I were to go take a look, for example, at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival in Rushville, Indiana, last November, Rushville is, it's an hour from Cincinnati, a couple of hours from Chicago. It's an hour from Indianapolis. It's an hour from Dayton, right? So there are a lot of people. There are over 2 million people in the area. But what worked in Rushville, one of the things that worked in Rushville is that and in Rush County, is that they're farming communities, and chocolate is essentially a farming, made from a farming commodity. It's made from cocoa beans. And so it turned out that the connection to cocoa farmers, right, with local farmers, was one of the reasons, in my opinion, that this was a success. And not necessarily the most intuitive success. It did work out in the end, right? But that's something to understand, even though, in this case, there was a market of more than 2 million people within an hour's drive, Rushville and Rush County are relatively small, but there was a constituency that could be appealed to. And it turns out that appealing to that community led to greater participation, a greater understanding, immediate connections between corn farmers and cocoa farmers. So you have to understand if your audience is large enough, and if your audience may not be large enough, maybe you need to change what it is that you're doing to be able to speak to a larger audience. So Elmer, I guess the working on it is you're not quite sure if you're going to be at the salon in 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 New York in a couple of months. I hope you are. Let me know. I just would love to say hello and see you there. If you're watching this and you are going to be at the Salon du Chocolat in New York at the end of the month, I'm now going to be there. I'm going to be there for setup on the Friday. Oh, by the way, that's if you ever get the chance, right, as a non-exhibitor participant in a show, to be able to show up on setup day as a member of the press. I used to do this. I would get setup day badges from friends who were exhibiting, colleagues who were exhibiting, and have the opportunity to walk around the show during setup day, get the lay of the land, understand where people were, see people that were new. That's my number one tip. If you have the opportunity to go during setup day, don't interrupt people, but just use it to get the lay of the land. A really, really important thing to do. So the next thing I want to talk about is differentiation. And it goes back a little bit to this idea of know who your audience is, right? And understanding how big your audience is and how you're going to appeal to them. And understand about differentiation. Is there anything you're doing which is different from what everybody else is doing? I think by this time, everybody has been to some sort of exhibition, whether it's a wine exhibition or something like that, some sort of food-focused exhibition event. And we know how it works. And there tend to be booths where people sample and buy. Maybe there's some educational programs. But specifically, what are you doing that's going to bring people in? What is the nature of the experience? How are you doing what you're doing, which is different from the way everybody else is doing? Because there's lots of competition. There's lots of competition out there. So if you want to, here is my events calendar, and January, February, March. And this is only a small fraction, right? And one of the reasons why a calendar like this makes sense is if you want to organize a festival of your own and you're thinking about when to do it, what you might want to do is find out how much other competition there is for the month that you're doing it in. There's a festival somewhere on almost every weekend of the year, somewhere in the world. There is lots of competition. Every single organizer of every single one of these festivals is trying to figure out how to make their festival attractive to you. And if you're the organizer of the festival, what you need to do is come up with something that is going to bring people in. And if it's the same old, right, especially if it's the same formula every year, year over year, you need to understand that you may lose that differentiation. You need to do something. And a lot of that differentiation is based upon the market. So the Salon du Chocolat in Paris is the Salon du Chocolat in Paris because it's attended by Parisians, right? And the organizers of the salon understand that, right? And it is the dynamic that makes the Paris show work, right? Originally, the original owners of Event International, specifically Sylvie Douce and Francois Janté. And one of the differentiators there, right, was that Sylvie and Francois had a great team, and they let their team manage everything. And so they went out on the show floor and they were representing the brand. They would say hello to everybody, make everybody feel welcome, to be a part of this, special group that got put together. But also in Paris, which is a fashion capital, it made sense that there was a défilé, a fashion show. It is very, very French in the way it's put together. It's a VIP experience. There's a lot of, the last time I was there, 2018, I believe, there's a lot of, can I get a front row seat for the show? There's a lot of cachet around it. And so it makes sense in France. But also, it's important to understand that in France or in Paris, um, there are a lot of people who are living in Paris who didn't grow up in Paris, weren't born in Paris. So they moved to Paris for work. And so there are a lot of exhibitors at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris from outside of Paris. And people can go to the salon and they can go find their hometown favorites and buy guimauve and buy many other things. Guimauve are chocolate covered marshmallows and other things. So you can go there. You could go there and find, some of the top, chocolate brands in France: Bonnat, Prélu, Jean-Paul Levin, Bernachon, Cluzel. People like Sadaharu Aoki were there. Koyama from Japan. It was a place to go and meet all of these people, and that was its cachet. But also, many of the people, I would say the largest percentage of them, were there to find their hometown favorites, or to see one of the cultural events. So often dancing or music or something like that on the main stage. It worked because the people understood what Parisians wanted, and that's one way they differentiated the Paris show, right? Through that understanding, right? You need to understand, what do other festivals do well, right? So one way to organize a successful chocolate festival is to go to 20 others and look at them and very, very carefully pull them apart and understand the elements that appear to be working and avoid the elements that appear to take a lot of effort, but don't necessarily return a lot of value to any constituency. They're not returning value to the sponsors. They're not returning value to the exhibitors. They're not returning value to the participants. Focus on what works, and then try to put your own spin on it. Right? For the Big Chocolate Show, one of the things that we did in year 3 of the Big Chocolate Show, this was when we were at the New Yorker Hotel. Again, the old Church of Scientology. It was owned by the Church of Scientology. The one thing we do is we created a program called the Legends of Chocolate, which involved our engaging with a panel of about a dozen people to come up with names of people that they thought had been very influential in the history of chocolate. And one category was educator, one category was writer. I forget what all the categories were, even though I was the organizer of this effort. And then we held a Legends of Chocolate reception where we invited the people that we awarded to be a legend of chocolate that year. And it was an evening event. It was after the show closed. It was invitation only. It was a VIP experience. We got a lot of press. And that was one of the reasons why we did it. We did want to recognize that these people had made enormous contributions to chocolate, right? We did want to recognize them as legends, right? Which was, I think, crucial. But also we did it so that we could differentiate ourselves from other events, and the way we handled it. We just wanted to make sure that it was very, very different. So we had advisors, as I mentioned, as a part of the panel, who were recommending people. Then we had a vote among the panel, and then each one of the members of the panel introduced one of the legends. And so it was a really, really lovely event. Michael Coe was there. And then I believe Ed Seguin was there as well. I forget all the people who were there, but it was a lovely event. It's something that we did for differentiation. And had the Big Chocolate Show continued, I am sure that it is something that would have happened every single year. It was a differentiating event. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about people in my industry and how people thought about people in my industry, which is really, really valuable, really, really helpful. Right. The final one here is continuous improvement, embrace changing the format. One of the things that has always impressed me about Caroline Lubers and Jack Stein, who are the driving force behind Chocoa in Amsterdam, is that they seem to be doing a very good job of responding to changes of the industry. And while aspects of the format remain the same, from the first year at the Beurs van Belang today. The first year at the Burst von Blog is when they introduced the Chocolate Makers Forum, for example, which I moderated in that year, coincidentally, right? But they have taken very, very close attention to looking at what it is they've done and saying, can we modify what we're doing? Can we improve on what it is that we're doing? Rather than just taking the same basic formula over and over again. These are what the organizers of successful chocolate festivals do. They understand the impact of the location of the venue in terms of the brand experience that they want to put together, because among other things, that's going to attract sponsors and exhibitors. Right? All right. Less so about participants, although the location is going to affect participants who are coming. But the location and venue are going to set a tone, and that will help you attract sponsors and exhibitors. Right. Number 2, know yourself, know your markets, know your audience. What are you trying to achieve? Right. And who is going to respond to your reaching out and saying, we want you to be a part of this event. Right. And if you have the wrong image in the wrong place at the wrong time, you've put yourself behind you are between a rock and a hard place in terms of making something successful. And if all you're doing is copying what somebody else is doing, then it becomes a challenge, and to provide good reasons for exhibitors to be there, for sponsors to be there, and for participants to show up. Really, really important to understand those 3 things, right? Next, what you want to do is your primary focus has got to be on delivering value to your constituencies. The event is not about the organizers. It's not about you, right? It's not about you, right? The event is about it's about your sponsors, it's about your exhibitors, and the people who are going to attend. And you need to focus on delivering value. Value can be many things, and it could, you could have a very successful show in many respects, but people are waiting hours and hours and hours, and the registration experience is really awful. Now, it turns out that may not matter. I remember lines wrapping around the block at the Metropolitan Pavilion for the New York Chocolate Show. People would literally show up 3-4 hours in advance and stand in line in early November to get into the Metropolitan Pavilion for the event. There was this perception of a high-end event, and people, once they got in, were going to receive value for their entrance fee, right? So they were willing to wait in line. But it could be, so that's not something that we were able to capitalize on at the big chocolate show at the Tunnel. There was registration challenges, and I can tell you that we fielded a lot of issues around them. We had a lot of work to do in the line to make sure that people felt comfortable with the registration experience and signing in. But you have to focus on delivering value to your constituencies, and from the very, very beginning. It's not just what is in it for us as organizers. Obviously, you want to at least not lose a lot of money, right? But understanding why you're doing it and what the sponsors want from it, what the exhibitors want from it, and what the participants want from it. The sponsors want to have their brand associated with another successful brand. That's part of it. But they're also marketing something, and so they want some return on investment with respect to perhaps new customers and things like that. So what are your sponsors looking for, right, is an important place to start, and then create sponsorship packages around what they are looking to do, rather than saying, here's a sponsorship package for $10,000 and here's what we're willing to give you for that $10,000. It's really, really important to do that. Exhibitors want to sell stuff, right? Again, they don't want to lose a lot of money, but it's also important for exhibitors to know that coming out even is going to be a challenge. You've got to travel to the event, you've got the cost of the stand, you've got people, you've got accommodation expenses. I mean, it's not inexpensive to attend most of these shows, but being able to sell enough chocolate to be even at the end of a 1-day festival or a 2-day festival or a 3-day festival is often a challenge. right? But it's also about being able to, number one, market your company. So how is the organizer doing their marketing and how are they promoting the exhibitors? Right? And then there's also what's going on the other 11 months of the year. Well, I think one of the big mistakes that many, many festival organizers make is that they assume that everything they're doing is really about the week or two leading up to the festival and the days of the festival themselves, right? And in my experience, festival organizers who are successful are ones who engage in year-long programs to promote the people who exhibit at their festival one way or another, right? At the Big Chocolate Show, what we said is if you're an exhibitor, then we're going to do a monthly newsletter every year to our mailing, or every month to our mailing list. And if you want to, send us a special offer, or you want us to announce that you had just won something, some prize or something like that, we would be happy to include that at no additional charge in our monthly newsletter to our mailing list, just as a part of being an exhibitor at the show. And that's one of the ways that we tried to show value. Of course, we undercut that value by moving to a resort casino racetrack right in Queens that was an hour subway ride from Manhattan. That sort of undercut that value. But you need to focus on that as the first thing that you're doing. What are we delivering? How are we going to be different? What is our differentiation? How are we going to be different from what other people are doing? And how are we going to deliver value to each one of our constituencies? Of course, the person who's participating, the attendee, may want to come to learn things. They probably want to come for free samples. They would like to. They probably will sample free until they think they've got enough chocolate to cover however much they spent to get in the first place. And they may not actually start buying anything until they hit that point. And which says that you need to understand the dynamics of your market and focus on deliver. And in many cases, delivering value to exhibitors and delivering value to participants may be at odds with each other. So I think that one of the things that was interesting that Dustin ended up doing for the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival this year is if you got a VIP package, you got tokens which were worth, I think, $10, two $5 tokens, and you could use these tokens. You give them to an exhibitor, and they would accept them as cash. And so it reduced the price of the entry fee for the VIP ticket, and then it encouraged people to sell these things or to use them, right? By buying chocolate from exhibitors. So that's a way that you can focus on delivering value to customers, your constituencies, and then focus on differentiation. I saw this work really, really well at the Festival del Chocolate in Villahermosa, Tabasco, in Mexico, where a bank had set up a little like ATM-like structure. It was not an automatic machine, but there was a person, and what you could do is parents could exchange 100 peso notes for 25 peso cocoa beans, right? And they could give these 5 peso cocoa beans to their children. Their children could use the cocoa beans as currency, which of course ties into the history of cocoa in Mexico. It was really, really wonderful connection. It also meant there was a huge amount of breakage, non-use. People would buy these things and then keep them as souvenirs. I have several of them, as a matter of fact, that I bought in like 2017 maybe. And I don't know that I will the next time I will be to a Festival del Chocolate in Tabasco, and but I have these souvenirs, and the festival organizers were able to take that to the bank, literally. So these are ways that you can differentiate yourself and find ways to deliver value to your exhibitors. I mean, find a bank sponsor who is doing these things that you can give to virtuous circles, right, is a way to go. Find these things, and you'll find fun ways to deliver value to everybody. Right. Another thing that the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival is doing is they have a YouTube channel. And one of the things that they did is we were able to record 9 of 14 panel programs, and they put the videos from all 9 of those 14 panel programs up on their YouTube channel. It is woefully undersubscribed, and there are not a whole lot of views on many of the videos. It's only up for a little while, but you should go there. You should subscribe, sign up for notifications, and all that kind of stuff. And you can hear from Lila Carvajal, who's the founder of Cocoa Supply. And I gave one of my AMA talks, as well as gave the opening remarks. Not a bad job, if I say so myself. But I look at this compared, for example, with the Northwest Chocolate Festival's YouTube channel. They have a few more videos, but they've been around since 2017. They haven't posted anything since 2019. And so if you look at a big chocolate festival like that, they've actually not done a whole lot to use YouTube to promote themselves and their exhibitors. And I think that's a mistake. You can deliver value right through a festival YouTube channel, which promotes right the sponsors and the exhibitors and even the participants. They can give testimonials. Right, so there's a lot of stuff that can be done, right, to deliver value to constituencies. Right? What you have to do also is build goodwill and build on goodwill. So I talked about Sylvie and Francois, Sylvie Douce and Francois Janté, who are the founders of Event International, right, and the work that they did in Paris, London, and New York. So when I met them in New York, right, their job was to engage with the exhibitors, engage with participants, and make sure that everybody was enjoying themselves. If there was a problem, they would hand them off to someone who was doing. But they were the representatives. I mean, literally and figuratively. You know, they were the organizers of the event, ultimately at the top of the food chain. But they were out there, you know, building goodwill, right, and making sure that everybody was being paid attention to. And it's really, really important to do that. I think that there have been many festivals that I have gone to where the organizer, right, was not visible, right? They chose for one reason or another to think of themselves as, I need to be in the office taking care of all of the little details of what's going on. And, you know, if I were to go back to the World Pastry Forum and the National and World Pastry Team Championships, you know, absolutely. You know, I think about Michael Schneider and Jacques Therese and Norman Love, who I think of as the forward-facing people who are part of that. They were involved in there in a way that they were open and visible and approachable and accessible, and were making sure that everybody was having essentially a good time, right? That there was nothing that was getting in their way of their enjoying the experience and being able to take something away from the experience. Uh, so the other part of one of the easiest ways to lose goodwill, right, is to postpone or cancel a festival. And so you know, and sometimes you can't get around it. I mean, sometimes it is inevitable, right? So I think, for example, of the 2012 Salon de Chocolat in New York was the week after Hurricane Sandy. And Hurricane Sandy it turned the entire thing, you know, inside out. People couldn't show up. People who did show up, it was exhibitors and crowds. It was just really, really difficult. And that experience meant that the organizers of the salon didn't come back until 2019. So they left a gap. The Big Chocolate Show attempted to fill that gap, right? But then the salon came back in 2019. They were at Javits, as I recall, and they did a fabulous job of restoring a lot of the goodwill. It was very, very well organized. It was very well executed. People had a good time. They got a lot of people there. People remembered the New York Chocolate Show, the Salon de Chocolat, and still had some goodwill that they gave to the brand. But the next year, COVID, right? And so the 2020 show was originally postponed from late 2020 into 2021, and then it was ultimately postponed again, and then ultimately canceled. And that meant that the goodwill that they had been able to recover in the 2019 show, it got lost. And again, really, 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 like, was it their fault? You know, who when they set the dates for 2012, could they have known that there would be a once in a century hurricane? No, right? Could they know that there would be once in a century pandemic? No, right? And so, but it's really, really important that you, as organizers, you do whatever you can, right, to make sure that everybody who's involved, the sponsors, the exhibitors, and the participants, right, um, don't lose any faith in the organization. And I'm not pointing out, the salon here for any reasons. The craft chocolate experience is experiencing this problem right now. The 2024 show appeared to present to the organizers that there was no clear way forward to the show being profitable, and so they canceled the 2025 craft chocolate experience. And they have since modified the idea. So the event organizer took it over and they've modified it into something called Le Marché du Chocolat. And so they've gone from the Palais de Fine Arts to a hotel ballroom show. It's now a celebration of Mother's Day for the most part. It appears to be, the programming focus looks like it's a lot aimed at, people to get together, mothers getting together with mothers or mothers getting with families and celebrating Mother's Day with chocolate. It appears to be what's going on. I don't know how successful that is going to be. That rebranding is going to be. They changed the venue, they changed the name, they changed everything about the format and what it is that's going on. So I'm curious to know how it will be successful. There was some goodwill from the 2024 craft chocolate experience, but it did not create a firm enough foundation for the kinds of changes that they're making. So if you do have to postpone, you do have to cancel, you do need to make wholesale changes in what it is that you're doing. You need to be very clear about communicating what you're doing. No hint of any kind of equivocation about what it is that's going on. And I think that that's what people respond to, that this equivocation. All right. So building on goodwill, right? Have somebody who is the face of this, who can be out there in front, right? That people can respond to. I mean, this is one of the real successes that made the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival so successful this last year. Barb, everybody knew that they could go to Barb and they could get help. And Barb did a great job at putting everything together and making everything work. And for this coming year's festival, one of the things they're adding is the idea of a vendor buddy, which is a dedicated volunteer, right, whose job it is to be able to go and make sure that you as an exhibitor have everything you need so that you can focus on making the festival successful for you, right? And so that vendor buddy, right, Barb, these people who are the face of the festival to you, right, are one of the things that people will take away and remember from an exhibitor perspective, from a sponsor perspective. From the participant perspective, it also makes sense to say, here is a person that you can reach out to, or here's a place that you can go to make sure that if you have a question, you can get that question resolved very, very quickly. Right? And right, that's one of the things that is a really, really successful show. It's an element of the show that I think a lot of people don't think of, but it's really, really important. Finally, but you might think that you can do your own PR for this, but you can't. If you're the organizer of a festival, it makes sense to go out, even in this day of social media and all this kind of stuff. What you want to do is you want to have a professional PR firm or a professional PR person who can take care of that for you. You want to focus on the mechanics of your show. Somebody else will focus on the mechanics of broad promotion. You want to court the press. You want to make sure that you have as many press in as many different ways who are writing about you to as many different people who are incentivized to be able to promote what it is that you're doing, right? A good PR firm will help you do that and help you keep track of all those people. If you do not have a good CRM, right, which is a customer management system. You need a customer relationship management system. You need to have it. If you're working in spreadsheets, it won't work. You need to have something that will help you keep track of all of the contacts that you have with all of the sponsors, all of the exhibitors, whether they say yes, whether they say no, what their objections were. You need to have a group. If you have a group of people who are selling, they need to have access to a database of, what the objections are and how to go and work around those objectives and talk to people. If you're just using a spreadsheet and you're trying to keep a spreadsheet and it's not updated in real time, I mean, maybe if you're doing a shared Google sheet, or Excel and the Microsoft Cloud, maybe that will work. But in my experience, they're not flexible enough to do it. You need something which is going to keep track of that. You spend money on good PR. It will pay for itself over the course of the year, and then pay for a good customer relationship management system, because it will make everything a whole lot easier, especially if you are successful in the first year and you're going to the second year and you need to reach out to people again and say, hey, come back and support our festival again. The next thing is, to show app or not to show app. So here is the fundamental question you need to ask yourself about a show app, right? Whatever that show app is will people go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, download an app, install it on their phone, right? And then configure it, enter in personal data, and use it for a one-day show, or if they're only there for one session, if they're timed entry. Are people going to do that, right? And the answer is it's a real challenge to get people to download an app for a one-day show. Now, exhibitors, that's something else, right? But participants, if you're gonna ask participants to download an app and use it, right? You might have the best intention. Oh, you can download the app before you get there. You can find the names of exhibitors. You can put together a show plan. You can decide who you want to go see. You can find out who's doing what. You can book sessions, right, that you want to be in. But it's still a huge ask. It is really, really a challenge to get to do it. It can be nice. You can collect a lot of data about the people who are there. It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge to do. And before I go on to, I'm going to say, what are some of the unforeseen limitations that can doom you? So when we were doing the Big Chocolate Show, what we had is we were able to run polls and competitions within the app company called Huva. And this is my experience from 2015 and 2016. They may have solved these problems now, but these are specifically from 10 years ago, right? Is that there was no way to geofence. So we couldn't limit people voting to people who were actually at the venue, right? And so some exhibitors recommended that people back in their home country go download the app and vote for them. And we had no way to stop it. Just no way to stop it. And so these were favorites, but they weren't favorites of the. So there are a lot of things you may or may not know about what an app can do. And if you decide to use an app in a particular way, you need to understand what the potential technological limitations of your using the app for. So we had this idea for voting, and it turned out we realized, oh my gosh, right? When we looked at the people who had purchased tickets and looked at the people who had voted, they weren't correlated at all. And we had just found a way for somebody who wanted to game the system to game the system. An expensive lesson learned. It turned out that there was no easy way around the problem. There was a technological way to fix it. Again, we were asking people to download an app. We were giving them a reason to download an app, which is to vote for their favorites. But then we found out that there was this big loophole in voting. And I was the one who needed to deal with it. So this is, I now know what to look for in an app if I want to do something like that ever again. Quick shout out to Ewald Rietberg from Heinde and Vera in Rotterdam. Hey, Ewald, it's good to see you today. You just came back from Chocoa. I met you for the first time at Chocoa. I want to say it was 2020. Yeah, I think I met you in 2020. Then I went to Finland. Then I went to France. Then I went to Brussels, and on my way back to the airport, I stopped at Schiphol. I stopped in Rotterdam to visit Jan Willem for the first time, and that would have been just as the world was shutting down for 2020. So yeah, he did 2020. My memory is correct. So great. I started at the early say, my visiting the Bona in 1998 was one of the ways that I sort of remembered when the first festival was in New York. They happened the same year. So I'm constructing this mind palace of, what happened when I was doing things to help me remember, because after 25 years, I don't have a diary. I should have a diary, but I don't have a diary. So if you're going to do a show app, right, be very, very careful about asking the questions. Like, if you want to get somebody to download an app, right, for their being at your festival for 4 hours, you need to give them real reason to download the app, right? Even if it's just go to a web page, right? You need to give that, and then register so you can store things, like store people you want to, store companies you want to visit. You need to give people a real good reason to do that. And then you also need to be very, very careful about understanding what the technological limitations of the app are if you want to do something like run a poll, right, or run a competition. They do have these capabilities in many show apps, but they're really not designed for participants. They're designed for exhibitors. They're designed for speakers and things like that. And so you need to understand what the limitations are if you want to use them in that way. And sometimes you are not gonna get it. Another thing that you're going to want is you're going to want to have elements of a successful show. You want to have collectible swag and merch. Before we do that, something I also wanted to talk about: location and venues, and then delivering values. And I went to the Basel Watch Fair in 1996. And one of the things I learned about European festivals is that from year to year to year, companies are in exactly the same place. And they build their stands to occupy very, very specific places within the exhibition hall. Right? And so, we got this big watch company, and it's in a corner, and they've built a three-story stand, literally, where they have special, a coffee room on the second floor. They're showing off their watches on the ground floor, and then there's VIP suites for people who want to buy, $1 million watches on the top floor. But it's in the same place. And if anybody is a watch fan, and you can get into the Basel Watch Fair for free just by showing, your passport. If you're not from Switzerland, I think you may have to pay something if you're from Switzerland, at least in 1986. But people knew exactly where to go. Every year they could go to the Rolex booth, or they could go to this booth or that booth or the other booth. Shop. It's a long time ago, but I do remember that. And I remember that being part of going to SIGGRAPH, right? If I went to the SIGGRAPH event in the same exhibition hall, so going back to Los Angeles, for example, or going to Anaheim, or going to Dallas, or going to someplace else, the exhibitors would be in the same place. If I went to ISM in 2018, and it was obvious that exhibitors were in the same place, and they had been in that same location for year over year over year. And so if you're an organizer of a festival, one way to get exhibitors to re-up is to make sure that they have the premium locations that they look for year after year after year, so that people can come back to the show and know exactly where to find their favorite chocolate makers. That's one of the things I wanted to say as well. Then finally, so here we are, next to last, collectible swag merch. These are little enameled pins, which are designed by the organizing committee for SIGGRAPH, again, the Special Interest Group for Graphics. So the Dallas committee in one year gets to design their pin. The Los Angeles committee the next year gets to design their pin. The San Francisco committee the next year gets to design their pin. And these become collectible items. And what was interesting about these pins, or at least from 1994 to 1998, when I was collecting them because I went to the show every year, is that they were only available on setup day. And they were only, well, I wouldn't say they were only available to setup day, but they were primarily available the day before the actual exhibition began. right? And there were only certain ambassadors, only certain members of the organizing committee were deputized to give these pins out. So there may have been, like, for 25,000 people who would have shown up, and not including the exhibitors, that was just the number of the attendees. Maybe there were 10%, maybe there were 2,500 pins, right? And if you didn't show up on the first day, if you didn't show up at setup day, the likelihood of you getting one was next to zero. And so if you are putting together a chocolate festival, right, or any other kind of things like that, think about some collectible swag merchandise, right, which is identified for each year. The design is different. It's identified for the year. There's a limited number of them. Not, you may have some ambassadors who you need to be in the know. You need to know somebody who knows in order to get these things. So there will be some cachet, and you encourage people to put them on lapels and wear them around during the festivals. It's a great way to create mystique around your event, and to create a thriving interest in being there and being attentive and knowing people and understanding what's going on. It doesn't have to be pins. It can be many, many things. I mean, I just love these. They're relatively inexpensive, easy to do. And I again, like, in storage, they're not here with me. I have every single one of these I collected between 1984 and 1998. So they probably have no value other than the sentimental value of my being able to tell you. But I made sure that I was there and I knew someone, and I could go and I could ask and I would get one, right? So and you want that kind of loyalty among the people who show up at your show, whether they're on the exhibitor side or they're on the participant side. And I was there for the most part as an exhibitor, right? And for a number of years as a member of the press. But it was really, really important for me to be able to do those things, all right? And think about it yourself. What kind of collectible swag would you put together for your show? It's not a chocolate bar, by the way. The chocolate bar is not collectible because it won't last more than a year, right? It may not last. It may not last the show itself. You want something which is non-perishable, right? Although I suppose there could be a perishable component in it. You want something which is, and so again, what I would do is, we had ribbons which we would attach to our badges, and the ribbons would identify who we are. I would take all my pins and I would put them on my ribbons, and so people would know that I was a veteran, right? I had been to lots of SIGGRAPHs, and they could say which ones I'd been to. Don't overlook the value of merch and swag, making it collectible. And finally, the biggest mistake that you can make if you're putting together a chocolate festival is not to involve real-life cocoa farmers. Chocolate is made from cocoa beans. And the most important thing that we can do to connect people with what it is that we are doing to promote chocolate is to make sure that people understand who the chocolate makers are and their important role in what it is that they're doing. And so one of the elements that makes a successful chocolate festival is to have real life cocoa farmers there who can speak for themselves, who can talk about their experiences that they have, right? And what it means to them to be a part of a festival like this. And as I say, one of the things that I think that made the Rushville Festival, the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival, successful this last year is that it was a farming community. Right? So Rush County and Rushville farming community, a lot of people who came were farmers, and there was an instant connection. And that connection is different from people who live in New York City or live in Seattle or live someplace else. It made sense. It was contextually relevant. It made a huge amount of sense for that particular festival. But I think that no matter where you're doing a festival, having a cocoa farmer from a producing country who can speak with people and represent what it is that they're doing, educate people about the farming side of things is really, really important and really, really valuable. And that's what I have to say today about this topic of elements of a successful chocolate festival. This has been PodSaveChocolate episode 105. I do want to point out that I did a little work over the weekend. It was starting to take a long time for the archive page to load. And so I've created an extra archive page. So I put the first 100 episodes on their own archive page. So this is a new this is new one. So it's from November 17th, 2023 to February 14th, 2025. Here are episodes 1 through 100. And then there is another episode for 101 to the present day. So that's a little organizing that's been done to make this easier. But this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, go join. Always a free tier. If you do have the resources to be able to support the work that we're doing here directly, I really do appreciate that. Ask that you do. And with that, I'm going to end today's episode. There are no more questions, no more shout outs. I'm going to end today's episode as I end every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is to remind everyone that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you might need to reevaluate your life choices because you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.